I used to believe that love, real love, was about sacrifice. The kind where you put someone else's needs before your own and don't keep a tally of what it cost you. That belief carried me through decades of fatherhood. I raised my daughter, Amira, on my own after her mother died when she was only 6. One moment, I was a quiet man with a wife who ran the household with grace and patience, and the next, I was a widower trying to braid a little girl's hair in the mornings without her bursting into tears. I was clumsy with emotions, I'll admit that, but I never ran from responsibility. I learned to cook, learned to sew buttons, learned how to be both firm and soft when the situation called for it. My world, for the better part of 20 years, revolved around one person, and that was Amira. We didn't grow up rich, not by a long shot. I worked in maintenance at the local hospital for over 3 decades. I took night shifts and double shifts when they were offered, and I always brought home the leftover food they gave out after staff meetings. My daughter thought those half-stale muffins were treats from the bakery, and I never corrected her. I'd tell her stories about how they were made fresh that morning, and she'd gobble them up while humming. Every dollar I saved went into her future, her education fund, her school supplies, her prom dress, and later, her tuition. I never bought a new car. I never went on vacations. My idea of luxury was buying steak once a month, slicing it thin, and making it stretch over 3 meals. And yet, not once did I feel poor, because her smile made everything feel worth it. So when she told me she was getting married, I was filled with a sense of accomplishment that I couldn't put into words. This was it, the chapter where I finally got to step back and watch her step into her own happiness. She said she wanted a beautiful ceremony, something elegant and modern, something that would impress her colleagues and in-laws. I didn't flinch when I saw the budget. $50,000 was everything I had left in savings, money I had slowly tucked away in a locked drawer over the years. It was meant for my retirement, maybe a used RV I used to dream about, or a trip to Ghana to see the place my grandfather used to talk about. But when I looked at her eyes, sparkling with excitement as she described her dream wedding, I didn't hesitate. I wrote the check. I said, "Whatever you want, baby girl. Let's make it perfect." The planning moved quickly. She hired a high-end wedding planner who spoke in clipped tones and didn't make eye contact with me once. Every email went directly to Amira. I didn't mind. I thought, this is her world now, and I'm just lucky to be invited. I was never included in the menu tasting or the venue walkthrough, but I figured maybe that was how these things were done now. I did what I was asked, sent the funds, confirmed the payment installments, and kept quiet. Then, 3 days before the wedding, I got a text message from an unknown number. It read, "Sorry, sir, your invitation has been canceled. You can use this link to watch the wedding from home." At first, I thought it was a scam, or maybe some tech glitch. I chuckled, even, sat on the couch and showed it to my neighbor, Mr. Curtis, who squinted at it and said, "Must be some mistake. That's your daughter's wedding." Still, something felt off. I tried calling Amira. No answer. I left a voicemail, then another. I told myself maybe she was just overwhelmed. Maybe something last minute had gone wrong, and they were trying to limit headcount or work around COVID restrictions or God knows what. I wanted to believe the best. After all, I was the one who raised her. The one who used to sleep on the couch when she had nightmares. The one who drove her to college and cried the whole way back. Surely, she wouldn't shut me out. Not her father. The morning of the wedding, I put on the only suit I owned, a charcoal gray number that had gotten a little tighter around the waist over the years. I polished my shoes until they shined like glass and slipped a photo of her as a toddler into my inside jacket pocket, the one where she was wearing a tutu and grinning with 2 missing front teeth. I got to the venue early, bouquet in hand, heart pounding with a mixture of pride and nervousness. I kept imagining her walking down the aisle, veil trailing behind her, glancing at me from across the room with a smile that said, "You did it, Dad." But when I reached the front gate, everything changed. A young security guard, barely older than 20, stepped in front of me. "Name, sir?" he asked, eyes fixed on his tablet. I told him. I spelled it out twice. He typed, paused, and then said, "I'm sorry, but you're not on the list." I laughed. It came out dry and awkward. "That's a mistake. I'm the father of the bride." He looked confused, then uncomfortable. He turned to a woman with a headset who came over and glanced at the screen. She tapped something, then looked up at me with a frown. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This event is closed to non-invitees. I felt the blood drain from my face. This is my daughter's wedding. I said again, softer this time, as if saying it gently would make it more believable. I paid for this. She didn't care. None of them did. Within minutes, I was escorted off the property like a trespasser, past rows of guests dressed in shimmering gowns and tuxedos. Some turned to stare. A few pulled out phones. I don't remember much of the walk back to my car, only that my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the bouquet twice before giving up and leaving it by the parking lot curb. I sat in my car for nearly an hour before turning the key. I didn't cry. I didn't even scream. I just sat there in that stifling silence, realizing that everything I had poured into her, all the years, all the money, all the love, meant nothing to the person she had become. I don't remember driving home that night. I only recall the heaviness in my chest, like I was carrying a full suitcase of wet clothes that had been strapped to my heart. The silence in the car was suffocating, broken only by the low hum of tires rolling over asphalt and the occasional flicker of my turn signal. My suit jacket was crumpled in the passenger seat. The boutonniere I'd pinned on with such care hours earlier now wilted and limp. The worst part wasn't the embarrassment or the confusion. It was the quiet ache of realizing I had been erased, written out of a moment I helped build, like an invisible man funding someone else's dream. By the time I pulled into my driveway, night had folded in completely. The porch light flickered, another thing I'd been meaning to fix, and I sat there in the driver's seat with the engine off, not ready to go inside. My home felt foreign, too big and too quiet for just me. I used to imagine grandkids running through the living room, toys scattered on the floor, laughter echoing down the hallway. That night, I stepped into an echo chamber of broken dreams, took off my shoes at the door like always, and sat down at the kitchen table without turning on the lights. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just kept staring at my hands, calloused, worn, still smelling faintly of the cologne I'd put on for the wedding. The next morning, I called her again, straight to voicemail. I texted once, just one line, "Why did you do that to me?" And the message stayed unread for 2 days. On the third day, I called my sister Lillian, who had always had a closer bond with Amira in recent years, especially after she landed that job downtown. Lillian sounded hesitant, her voice tight, like she knew something she didn't want to say. After a pause, she admitted, "I think Amira didn't want to mix her work life with her personal life. She told me her boss and colleagues were going to be there, and she didn't want to explain you." I laughed, but it wasn't a joyful sound. It was hollow, like something breaking. "Explain me," I said. "What the hell is there to explain?" She said, "You're old-fashioned. You wouldn't fit in." Old-fashioned. That was the word she used. Not poor. Not embarrassing. Not beneath her. Just a soft, corporate-friendly euphemism that meant the same damn thing. Lillian tried to soften the blow, saying Amira might be under pressure, trying to impress people, trying to build her image. But it didn't matter what the motive was. She didn't just exclude me. She humiliated me. Publicly. Deliberately. And I knew in that moment that this wasn't something she could talk her way out of. This was a decision, not a mistake. A week passed before I finally heard from Amira. She called late in the evening, casually, like nothing had happened. "Hey," she said, "I figured you'd be upset, but I didn't want to argue before the wedding." That one sentence lit something in me I didn't know I had. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the refrigerator door, and said, "So you thought blindsiding me was better?" "I didn't blindside you. I sent the link. You could have watched it. I paid for that wedding," I said, my voice shaking with restraint. "I spent $50,000, money I saved for decades. You think I did that so I could watch it on a damn live stream like some stranger?" There was a pause, then a sharp exhale. "Look, I'm grateful, okay? But I didn't want my colleagues knowing where I come from. You don't get it. In my world, appearances matter. In your world," I repeated, stunned. "What does that make me? Some museum exhibit of what you're trying to escape?" She didn't respond. I could hear her breathing on the line, but nothing else. That silence told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about fear or insecurity. This was shame. My own daughter was ashamed of me. That's when I said it. Calm, final, cold enough to freeze the air between us. From today, you stop being my daughter. I'm done. She laughed, but it was brittle, uncertain. You don't mean that. I do, I said. I raised you, clothed you, fed you, gave you everything I had, and you tossed me aside like trash. I would have stood by you through anything. But not this. You don't get to erase me and still reap the benefits of being my daughter. That relationship ends now. I hung up before she could say anything else. My heart was pounding. My palms were sweaty. But I didn't cry. Not this time. I walked to the back of the house and pulled open the drawer where I kept important documents. I found the deed to the townhouse she lived in, the one I'd transferred to her name last year as a wedding gift, under a conditional transfer that still kept the final title under my trust. A backup clause my lawyer insisted on, just in case. I called him the next morning and told him to execute the reversal and draft a lease agreement. The house would be rented out within 30 days. She received the notice a week later. She must have thought it was a prank. Then she started calling. Again and again. Then came the voicemails, some crying, some angry, some just whispering my name like she was trying to break through a wall she hadn't realized was built long ago. But I didn't answer. I couldn't. If I heard her voice again, I might have softened. And I couldn't afford softness anymore. Not when it had cost me everything. 3 days after the notice was delivered, she showed up at my house. I watched her from the window, standing there in designer heels and a cream coat, her eyes red, mascara running down her cheeks. She knocked for a long time. I didn't move. I just watched her. It was strange, seeing the person I had raised, the one I used to carry on my shoulders through street fairs and carnivals, now reduced to a stranger on my doorstep. She finally turned and walked away, wiping her face with the back of her hand. And still, I didn't open the door. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It lingers, reshaping everything you thought you knew. It rewires your memories, makes you question the authenticity of every smile, every hug, every time she looked me in the eye and said, "I love you, Daddy." I sat on the edge of my bed most nights, staring at the photos still lined across the dresser. Amira on her first day of school, Amira in her graduation cap, Amira blowing out birthday candles while I held the cake. What was real? Had I been living in some fantasy where love was mutual, where sacrifice would one day be honored with kindness? The silence from her and only made those questions heavier. After the visit to my doorstep, she didn't return. No calls, no texts, and I found myself checking my phone anyway, as if pain was a rhythm I had grown used to marching to. About 2 weeks after that last knock, I finally agreed to meet her. She sent a long email, more formal than I would have liked, asking for a conversation to clear the air. Part of me wanted to delete it, pretend she no longer existed, but another part, the old father in me, the man who had patched her scraped knees and snuck snacks into her backpack, wanted closure. So I said yes, on one condition. We'd meet at a diner halfway between our homes. Neutral ground. No lawyers. No theatrics. Just truth. When I walked into the diner, she was already there, sitting in a booth by the window, her phone resting face down on the table like it was holding some secret even she didn't want to face. She stood when she saw me, arms half open like she wasn't sure if a hug was allowed anymore. I gave a polite nod and slid into the seat across from her. No hug. Not anymore. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice quieter than usual. The kind of soft you use when you know you've done something awful but don't have the stomach to say it out loud. "I'm not here for apologies," I replied. "I'm here for honesty. So just say what you came to say." She looked away, gathering her thoughts. Her hands were clasped together tightly, nails painted a soft nude color, the kind of detail I might have noticed with admiration once. Now it felt like camouflage. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but careful, like someone walking barefoot over broken glass. "I never meant to hurt you," she began. "But the world I live in now, it's different. I work with people who judge everything. How you dress, how you talk, who your family is. I've spent years building a reputation, and I was scared that if they saw where I came from, they'd think less of me." "Where you came from?" I repeated, the words sticking in my throat. "You mean me?" She nodded reluctantly. "I didn't want to risk that. You're from a different world, Dad." You still wear the same shoes you had 10 years ago. You drive a beat-up car. You speak your mind without filtering. That doesn't work in my world. For a moment, I said nothing. I just stared at her. My daughter, the same girl who once cried when I missed her school recital because of an overnight shift. The same girl who used to beg me to tuck her in twice just to hear another bedtime story. And now she sat across from me, describing me like I was some relic, some unsightly stain she was desperate to hide. My voice cracked slightly as I answered. So let me get this straight, I said, leaning forward. You took my money, $50,000 of my life savings. You used it to fund the perfect, polished wedding. And then you turned around and told security to throw me out like I was a homeless man trying to sneak in. Because I didn't fit your image? I didn't tell them to throw you out, she muttered, as if that detail absolved her. But you knew I wasn't invited? I shot back. You knew I wouldn't be allowed in. You sent me a text. A damn link to watch it from home, like I'm some casual acquaintance. How do you justify that? Tears welled up in her eyes then, but I didn't reach out. I didn't offer comfort. Not this time. I didn't think it would go that far, she whispered. I thought maybe you'd understand. Understand what? I asked. That my love wasn't enough? That the man who raised you, who worked 2 jobs to pay for your tuition, who skipped meals so you could go to dance camp, that man embarrasses you now? She couldn't answer. She looked down, eyes fixed on the menu, tears dripping silently onto the laminated paper. I gave you that house, I said after a pause. As a gift. A home. Not just the walls and the furniture, but a symbol. And you took it thinking there would never be a cost. But there was. And that cost was respect. She finally looked up. I made a mistake, okay? A big one. But I'm still your daughter. I shook my head slowly. No, Amira. Not anymore. A daughter loves without conditions. A daughter honors her father. You lost that title the moment you chose strangers' opinions over the man who gave you everything. The waitress came by, asked if we wanted anything. Neither of us answered. She left quietly. I just wanted to fit in, Amira whispered after a long silence. I didn't want to be the girl with the janitor dad. And there it was. The truth, raw and ugly. That word, janitor, like it was something shameful, like it was less than, when in reality it was the job that built her life. That paid for her braces, her field trips, her damn wedding. I stared at her, truly stared, and for the first time, I saw a stranger. A woman who bore my features, but none of my heart, none of my soul. I may have been a janitor, I said, rising to leave, but at least I never cleaned up my integrity for other people's approval. She reached out then, tried to grab my hand, but I stepped back. Please, she whispered, don't do this. It's already done, I said, and I walked out. The thing no one tells you about drawing a hard boundary is how heavy the silence feels afterward. It's not relief at first, it's guilt. It's walking through your house and catching a glimpse of her old dance shoes in the closet you never cleaned out, or heating leftovers in the same microwave she used to burn popcorn in while watching Disney movies. It's wondering if you were too harsh, if maybe she really did make a mistake and not a choice. But then you remember. You asked her, point blank, to be honest, and she said it with her whole chest. I didn't want my colleagues to know you're my father. That was no accident. That was truth. And truth doesn't get softened by silence. It gets sharpened. The day after our meeting at the diner, I called my lawyer again. I didn't have to explain much. He already knew the context from the reversal clause we had written into the property transfer. When I had gifted Amira the townhouse last year, I had done so with pride, yes, but not without caution. He had advised me to include a reversion clause, just in case she ever became unfit to maintain ownership. I thought it was overkill back then. Now it felt like foresight. I told him to go ahead and execute the clause, draft a lease, and get a property manager to list it for rent within the month. The notice was sent via certified mail, with her name on the envelope in bold print. It wasn't personal. It was business. Cold, clean, and undeniable. The kind of paper that doesn't need to scream. It just tells the truth. She received it 3 days later. I know because the phone started ringing again. Not texts this time. Full-blown calls. At first, one every few hours. Then every hour. Then voicemails. First came the denial. This can't be real. Then the confusion. Why are you doing this? And finally, the desperation. Please, Daddy. I'm sorry. Please don't take my home. But I didn't answer. I listened to each one in full, though. I needed to hear the tone shift, the way her voice started as proud and ended as pleading. I needed to know she felt even a fraction of the rejection I had felt when I stood at her wedding gates and was told I wasn't welcome. A week after the notice, she came to my door again. This time, she wasn't dressed like the polished professional she wanted her coworkers to see. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, eyes swollen from crying, sweatshirt hanging off one shoulder. She looked small, like the girl I used to carry into bed when she fell asleep in front of the TV. For a moment, I hesitated. For a moment, my hand twitched toward the doorknob. But I didn't move. She knocked again, then pressed her forehead to the door. "Dad," she said, voice thick with emotion. "I know I messed up. I know what I said was horrible. I was wrong. Please, please don't do this to me. That house, it's the only stable thing I have right now. I panicked, okay? I thought if I could just keep everything looking perfect, no one would see how scared I am. I'm scared, Dad. I feel like I don't belong anywhere anymore." I stood behind the door, forehead pressed to the wood like hers. A breath apart, but a world away. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. She sounded so much like her younger self again, vulnerable, raw. And that old ache in my chest, the fatherly instinct to fix everything, to forgive, to wrap her in my arms and say, "It's okay, baby," it came surging back. But I held the line. Because love without boundaries becomes abuse. And I wasn't going to be used again. "You made your choice," I said quietly through the door. "Now you live with it." She cried harder, muffling her sobs in her sleeves. "I'm begging you," she said. "Please don't take my home." I didn't answer. I waited until the knocking stopped, until I heard her footsteps retreat down the porch stairs. Then I slid to the floor on the other side of the door and cried like I hadn't in years. Not out of regret, but out of grief, for the loss of a daughter who had once looked at me like I was her whole world, and now looked at me like an obstacle in the way of her curated life. A few days later, the property manager confirmed that the townhouse had been listed. Applications were coming in fast. It was in a prime location, and the rent would give me a steady monthly income, something I hadn't even thought about when I gifted it to her. Funny how quickly blessings return when you reclaim what's yours. I drove past the house once, not to spy, but to say goodbye. It was a beautiful place. I had picked it for her because it had a front porch just like the one on her favorite childhood storybook, the one where the little girl waved to her dad from a white rocking chair. She never sat on that porch. Not once. I didn't hear from her for nearly 2 weeks after that. No calls. No texts. The silence this time felt different, less like guilt and more like defeat. She had realized, finally, that I wasn't bluffing, that this wasn't a tantrum or a punishment. It was a consequence, one she had earned. One evening, I got a letter, not typed, handwritten. The envelope had no return address, but I recognized her writing instantly. Inside, she didn't apologize, not really. She just wrote, "I didn't know who I was without my job, without my friends, without the life I built. And I was afraid you'd remind me of everything I used to be. I was afraid they'd see that part of me and laugh. But I see now that I'm the one who should be ashamed, not of you, but of myself." I read that letter twice. Then I folded it and put it in the same drawer where I kept her baby shoes, her report cards, the macaroni necklace she made in 3rd grade. I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because I did. The letter should have brought me peace. In some way, I suppose it did. It was the closest thing to acknowledgement I'd gotten from Amira. The first time she peeled back the polished layers and let the real her, flawed, scared, prideful, speak without hiding behind some cold professional mask. But closure, I've learned, is rarely clean. Even with her letter folded neatly into my drawer, I still woke up some mornings with her voice echoing in my head, asking me not to take her home, not to shut the door on her completely. And even though I stood firm in my choice, even though I knew deep down that what I did was necessary, I carried that decision like a brick in my chest. That's the price of boundaries. Peace, yes, but never without weight. News of what happened between us didn't stay quiet for long. Families are like leaky pipes. Information finds a way to drip through, no matter how tight you think the seal is. It started with my sister Lillian, who apparently had been getting distressed, phone calls from Amira. Then came the cousins, the aunties, the uncles, the ones who had all smiled in my face at Thanksgiving but were now whispering about me behind closed doors. The calls came in slowly, starting polite, then shifting into judgment. "You really kicked your own daughter out of the house you gave her?" one cousin asked, as if I'd tossed her into the street with a garbage bag. "She's family," another insisted, as if that word erased the pain she'd caused me. "Family doesn't treat each other like that," I said to one of them over the phone. "And parents don't abandon their children," they snapped back. That one hit me in a soft spot I hadn't expected to still exist. Abandonment. Was that what this looked like from the outside? Was I just another bitter, stubborn father who couldn't forgive his child for a single mistake? But no, it wasn't one mistake. It was a series of choices, each one made with clarity and intention. She didn't forget to invite me. She excluded me, and then discarded me when I was no longer convenient. That wasn't a slip. That was character. Still, the pressure wore on me. There's something about being misunderstood by the people who should know you best that scrapes at the soul. I'd spent my whole life being the dependable one, the uncle who helped move furniture, the brother who paid off Lillian's electric bill once without asking for repayment. And now suddenly, I was the villain, a man too proud to forgive, too cold to embrace the messiness of love. It made me question everything. So I did what I always did when the world didn't make sense. I went quiet. I withdrew, answered fewer calls, sat on the porch at sunset, and let the sky tell its story while I held mine close to the chest. Then one day, someone knocked on my door, not Amira this time, but my niece Renee. She was Lillian's daughter, 27, newly engaged, the kind of young woman who still called me Uncle Jay with the same warmth she had as a child. I opened the door, half expecting a lecture, but she just smiled and held up a brown paper bag. "I brought chicken and dumplings," she said. "I know you haven't been eating much." I stepped aside and let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I used to cut Amira's birthday cakes, and for a long while, we just ate in silence. There was something healing about that. No judgment, no probing questions, just company. When we were halfway through our bowls, she finally spoke. "Everyone's talking," she said gently, "and I just wanted to hear it from you." I took a breath, then told her everything. Not just the wedding, but the years before, the subtle shifts in Amira, the way she started calling less, visiting only when it was convenient, laughing nervously when I asked about her work like I was a topic she didn't want to bring into the light. I told her about the planning, the money, the text message, the security guard who looked at me like I was some gatecrasher. I told her about the house, the reversal, the pleas I ignored. I told her everything, and when I was done, I expected her to look at me like the rest of them did, like I had gone too far. But she didn't. She reached across the table and took my hand. "I would have done the same," she said. "Maybe not at first. Maybe I would have tried to talk it through. But if someone disrespected me like that, erased me like that, I couldn't let it slide either. Especially not after everything you've done for her." I didn't realize how badly I needed that validation until I felt my shoulders sag with relief. To be seen, not as a tyrant, but as a father trying his best to preserve what little dignity he had left, that meant everything. Renee stayed for hours that night. We talked about life, about her upcoming wedding, about how different families look when you're a child versus when you're an adult. She promised to invite me to hers personally, to make sure I didn't just get a link. "You'll walk me down the aisle," she said, and though I laughed at first, I saw the sincerity in her eyes. "You've got a father," I reminded her. "Yeah," she said, "but you're the one who showed up." That one stuck with me for days. There was something about the way she said it, so simply, like it was the most obvious truth in the world, that reminded me that showing up isn't just about presence. It's about respect, loyalty, choosing love over image. I had done that for Amira her whole life. She didn't return the favor, and that's what hurt the most. In the weeks that followed, I heard more whispers. Some family members stopped calling altogether. Others tried to smooth things over with empty phrases like, "Life's too short to hold grudges," or "She's still your blood." But I stopped explaining myself. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. Instead, I started putting up small pictures of peace, cleaning the garage, repainting the fence, organizing my bookshelf. I signed up to volunteer at the community center on Saturdays, helping kids with their homework. I even started going to the little park by the river just to sit and listen to the wind. Peace didn't come in a flood. It came in trickles, but it came. And every now and then, I'd hear that line in my head. You're the one who showed up. And I'd remind myself that showing up for someone else doesn't mean you have to let them hurt you. Sometimes, showing up for yourself means walking away from the people you once thought would never turn on you. It's funny how life rearranges itself after heartbreak. Not with drama or fireworks, but with the slow, deliberate shifting of everyday things. Mornings got quieter, but also less heavy. I stopped reaching for my phone the moment I woke up. There were no more anxious glances at the lock screen, no waiting for messages that wouldn't come. I drank my coffee slower, let it go cold if it wanted to, because time didn't feel like something I was racing anymore. The grief didn't leave, but it settled into the background like an old scar, tender when pressed, but no longer open. I'd lost a daughter, yes, but I'd found something else in that loss. A boundary, a kind of peace I never thought I'd be brave enough to claim. I never truly understood what better alone meant until I lived it. It wasn't loneliness. Loneliness is the ache for company. Better alone is the refusal to settle for proximity without respect. It's coming home and knowing that every corner of your house is yours. No emotional landmines waiting to go off. No voice in your head telling you to shrink, to dim yourself, so someone else can shine without discomfort. I stopped second-guessing myself. Stopped apologizing for having feelings. Stopped asking for love that should have been given freely. My daughter made her choice. I made mine. And every day that passed after that, I stood a little taller in it. There were moments, of course, when the ache crept back in. Seeing fathers and daughters in the park, laughing without a care. Watching a wedding commercial on TV, some father walking his baby girl down the aisle with pride in his eyes. I'd feel it then, that quiet betrayal in my chest, and for a split second, I'd wonder if I had done the right thing. If maybe I had let pride dress itself up as self-respect. But that doubt never stayed long, because it only took remembering that text. Your invitation has been canceled. Here's the link to watch from home. To know exactly where I stood. I was never meant to be part of her world. Not unless I scrubbed myself clean of everything that made me who I am. And I won't apologize for where I came from. I won't erase the man who sacrificed steak dinners for ramen, who worked through back pain to pay tuition, who showed up to every school play in secondhand shoes, but a full heart. I won't pretend that being a janitor, a handyman, a provider of modest means makes me less worthy of love or respect. If anything, it makes me more. Because I gave her a foundation. I gave her roots. And if she chooses to sever herself from that in pursuit of polished branches, then so be it. A tree without roots falls eventually. I saw her once, about 6 months after it all went down. It was at a grocery store across town, not our usual stomping ground. I was just grabbing a few things. Eggs, milk, some peanut butter. She turned the corner of the produce aisle, and there she was, holding a basket, looking like she hadn't slept much. She froze. I froze. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then she took a tentative step forward. Not fast, not slow, just enough to make it clear she wanted to say something. But I shook my head gently. Not angry, just firm, like a closing door. She didn't protest. She just nodded, once, slowly, and stepped back. I turned and walked away, heart pounding, but grounded in my choice. It wasn't out of hatred. It was out of self-preservation. A way of telling myself, you've come too far to be hurt again. The truth is, I did forgive her. Not because she asked, not because she deserved it, but because I needed the freedom. Forgiveness isn't about saying what they did was okay. It's about saying, I won't carry this poison any longer. I forgave her the way you forgive a storm, acknowledging it came, that it wrecked something sacred, but also knowing you rebuild afterward, stronger, wiser. I forgave her in silence, in stillness, in the soft reshaping of my days. And no, we never reconciled. Not officially. Some wounds don't close that way. Some just scar and remind you what you survived. I kept the letter she wrote. It's still in that drawer, tucked between baby photos and old receipts from field trips. Sometimes I open it and read it again, not for hope, but for clarity. To remind myself that people reveal themselves in their ugliest moments. and it's not my job to convince them I'm worthy of decency. That burden ended the day I stopped begging for inclusion. The house she once lived in is now occupied by a young couple. Nice folks, polite, pay their rent on time. They planted flowers on the porch. Real ones, not the plastic ones Amira used to put out for appearances. I walk by sometimes just to see them bloom. I still keep in touch with Renee. We've grown close in a way I didn't expect. She comes over for dinner now and then, sometimes bringing her fiancé, sometimes just herself when she needs to vent about wedding stress. I gave her a small framed photo recently of her as a child, on my shoulders at a 4th of July fair, cotton candy in one hand, the other waving at the camera. She cried when I gave it to her. "You've always been there," she said, "even when you didn't have to be." That one line undid me. I had to turn away for a moment, gather myself. Because yes, I always showed up. For her. For Amira. For anyone who needed me. And for a long time, I thought that was enough. That if I just kept giving, they'd never turn on me. But now I know better. Showing up matters, yes. But showing up for yourself? That's everything. I may be alone now in a way I never expected to be at this age. No grandchildren to chase after, no Sunday dinners with a bustling house. But I'm not empty. I'm full of stories. Full of peace. Full of the quiet kind of love that doesn't need to prove itself to anyone. I have my porch, my garden, my books, my memories. I have the version of myself that refused to be disrespected one more time. And if I had to do it all over again, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every penny spent, I still would. Because that's who I am. But this time, I'd draw the boundaries sooner. I'd recognize the signs earlier. And I wouldn't wait until the door slammed shut to realize I deserved better. Because sometimes the hardest truth to swallow is this. Not every child grows into someone who deserves the parent they had. And when that happens, walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. If this story hit a nerve, if you've ever felt the sting of being excluded by the very people you sacrificed for, then you're not alone. Sometimes choosing peace means choosing distance, even from family. If you believe in standing up for your worth, in drawing the line where respect ends, then do me a favor. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories that remind us that boundaries are not cruelty. They're self-respect. Your story matters. Your peace matters. And here, we tell the truth, no matter how painful it is. See you soon in the next story.